the chicks that he's fat.
Oh, when he ran him up.
That's a fact.
He said, excuse me.
He had to get his guy's feet first.
He was still moving.
I mean, that's all. They don't know how the ball.
Yeah.
But it about,
That's a
that
foul.
is, it was, yeah. Whether you meant to or not, it was just incidental. I didn't mean to. He just turned around.
Yeah, I mean,
Now,
but- I mean, you don't see this on the football field that hard.
that's right.
Yeah, I saw that corner behind, I was like, what just happened over
When I
there?
watched Houston play in the past, I always thought you say, they play really physical, or they play dirty. Which one do you want to say?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, I said a lot of, it's dirty. But it's very physical.
Called it bully ball.
It's bully ball.
It is bully ball.
Cause like, but if you
That's
get
what
away with
Jason used to do to me when he come over my house and play ball. He just throw me up in the shrubs and say,
Yeah, I weighed about 160. He weighed about.
I probably
He
180.
weighed 200.
I didn't.
He
I
weighed
probably
200.
did 180 then.
Showed him what it was about on the court, on the streets.
His body would be right on out.
He didn't have any sympathy for his father-in-law.
He was
You know,
40 years
I always
old.
think about your daddy and Red Casker. Let's see. Well, let's see. Where was it? Was it on? It was his mouth, right? Where your daddy had to get the stitches. You remember that? Okay. When they were playing, I think it was church league, I assume. And Red was playing against your dad, and I don't know what the team was. And Red trucked him. And your dad had to have stitches. I haven't looked, unless I've got something all confused there.
Yes.
When I played you at the house that time, that you may have been 35.
Let's see.
Did you really push him into the bushes?
No, I knocked him in the bush.
Well, he really did.
Like two-hand push or like just, just,
Sheer
Yeah.
mass.
It's a bold move.
Sheer, just probably like a one dribble drive.
Yeah, when he asked for Susie's hand in marriage, I said, do you remember that time you did that?
It's a bold move.
And it was a holly bush.
It was a holly bush.
He quit.
Yeah, I got to remember when my daughter started beating me in basketball.
Me and Jimmy would play Susie and Brandy Ray. Because they were like teammates. They quit playing us when they dominated. When we were 12, they were pretty good.
Was your mother supposed to be?
She had one. So I don't think.
I'm thinking Peggy. They did a tribute so soon after they put the order. I think it might be the same day. It was really, really quick.
Are you going the whole time?
Because I know, I don't know if put them all in the same place. I know Peggy's is right here.
I don't know where they put her about.
I mean, I don't know.
they're all in the chest.
They all actually started the same order.
I know they did Peggy so quick, I thought, what you need to do that thing? Settle. Settle in. And I know they had trouble with Peggy's the first time trying to get the, so there's some kind of little, I'm gonna call it a valve, a little dropper thing, push in.
Yeah, but they still put some topical stuff on
Yeah.
the numbing before they access it.
If Peggy's over there. She saw it online, and she said she read it, she just didn't understand. But actually, they could use it.
You can't read it, and I really don't know what it means. The nurse,
The oncologist said, reading Cancer far enough.
Year,
Veteran
crazy, you got the end of the year, really
And
crazy.
so,
Summer
smoked.
fever happening again, the end of the school year
So that's
stuff.
where she saw.
Brandon's about to start
When I also
testing.
saw something. I'm
Feel
not
for
sure
you.
that's part of your heart. Maybe you can't read good places.
I guess we'll go ahead and start. It is, we're through 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
We try to keep that very strict 10 minutes late. Time for everybody to get here after shuffling their kids around or whatever they have to do. Good to see you all. I've been pretty busy since last I talked. Spent about 10 days in Arizona, doing everything you can do in Arizona. And then, of course, last week we were rained out, weather got bad. I was watching the news tonight, and the guys on there said, there's a chance of storms tomorrow. I looked at it. That is not, they're not. I'm convinced that the guys do weather most of the time is boring. So you gotta spice it up. Like, it's not hot, it's hot, but then there's heat index, which may kill you. Or wind chill. So they live for these weeks when there's storms. They love that. I'm sure they got their cot they sleep on. We're
That 5-gallon bucket sitting out, but filled up.
I mean, it was like building our weather. It hadn't gone away yet. Anybody have anything blown away that they cherished? I mean, anything? I got a steady stream of knocking on the door. Oh, I was in the neighborhood. I was looking at your roof. You know, there's got to put a sign on the door. We already have somebody. Thank you. We're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. Whole chapter, not just 13 verses. It's one of those kind of transitional chapters where it's talking about what's going on rather than a lot of teaching. So we'll deal with it. Let's have a prayer. Father, as we open your word, thankful for it. Let us to learn from it, that we have one another that we lean on and help to understand it. Just pray that you help me as a teacher to be able to explain things that are understandable, make them more complicated. God. I'm thankful for the time together, people that you brought together in this class. Thank you for all things. Let's take a little bird's eye view of the chapter to begin with. All right. Paul explains in the first part of the chapter why he sent Timothy back to them while he's remained in Athens. And here's where we have to get into travelogue a little bit. You remember when we did the introduction, we talked about this first visit to the Thessalonian church, or the establishment of the church of Thessalonica, happened on the second missionary journey. And Paul was in the area we call Asia Minor. I don't think they call it that anymore. That's just Bible thing. Turkey. And it receives what we call the Macedonian call. It got the visions. It came over to Macedonia and helped us. So we went over there, and you have the story in Acts chapter 15 of Philippi, the jailer. After they left Philippi, they went to Thessalonica. They stayed, according to the text, about 3 Sabbath days. Okay, so 2 weeks, 4 weeks, somewhere in there. If you spread that out, could be almost 4 weeks or a little over 2 weeks. So it wasn't a long time he was there. And so converted, they started the church. Well, there was some persecution, some from Jews, some Gentiles. And Paul and his traveling companions were forced to leave Thessalonica, to flee, basically, because of the trouble that was started there. So they left there and they went down to Athens. So they're in Athens when Paul is writing about this. And they left in such a hurry, got these new Christians. I mean, what did we not tell them? How are they doing? Did the persecution that started when we were there spill over onto them? And how are they doing with that? And they didn't have the internet yet. It was a couple years later. So there was no email, there's no way to communicate at all, except to send somebody, the most efficient way. So Paul said, Timothy, you go back and check those people. And that's what he's talking about. He was fearful that persecution might have disheartened their faith. I mean, just they're brand new Christians. They're not even a month old yet, basically. Maybe a little more than that, depending on how long it took them to travel from Thessalonica to Athens. But they're young. They're new Christians. If you can remember back when you were a new Christian, and the faith is kind of fragile. Somebody comes along, they can bump it a little bit. And especially persecution. We don't know the kind of persecution they were experienced. I don't know. If you sat me down and told me to write out all the times I've been persecuted, I don't know. I mean, Don Walker was mean to me one time. I mean, what am I going to say? I mean, I feel like I've led a charmed life. I can't say that for every Christian in the world, but he was fearful that persecution was going to derail their new faith. So Timothy was sent, and that phrase that was on the beginning, to establish and encourage their faith. All right? You can't encourage it till you start it. I mean, you can't water a plant till you plant it, right? So you got a couple of steps here. He was there to help make sure their faith taken root and was off to a good start, and then to encourage it with watering, things you do to a plant to make it grow. So this is what Timothy's job is. Why Paul sent him back, felt like it was necessary. Because, you have to understand, while Timothy was doing this job, he wasn't with Paul doing his job that he normally would do with Paul. So there was a cost to this, and that's how important it was to Paul. The middle part of the chapter, starting verse 6, Timothy brought back good news. He said, hey, things are great. Things are going really well. It's funny, the little video that I showed on the introduction has cartoons, illustrating what's going on. Paul brings back this report that the Thessalonians are doing fine, when the three people that the cartoonist draws, one has his arm in a sling, one has a bandage on their head, they think they were beaten up. And that may be the case. Maybe they had undergone some persecution, some afflictions, some problems because of their new faith. Maybe simply because of their association with Paul and Silas and Timothy. We don't know. But Timothy brought back good news, said things are going well in Thessalonica. This comforted Paul greatly, who was suffering his own problems. They seemed to follow him wherever he went. And then Paul prays that he might see them again and perfect what is lacking in their faith. He offers a prayer that God might direct his way to them. Verses 10 through 13 are basically a prayer, right in the middle of the book of 1 Thessalonians. He also prays that God will help them increase and abound in love, one another and to all, not just to one another, but to everyone. So that's kind of the overview. Now the context we have to look at. The very first word of chapter 3 is the word so. And so when something starts like that, you want to look back and see what was going on right before that. This Ken would have talked about 2 weeks ago. But verses 17 through 20, he says, "But brothers and sisters, we were orphaned by being separated from you for a short time, in person, not in thought, out of our intense longing to make every effort to see you. For we wanted to come to you, certainly I, Paul, did, again and again, but Satan blocked our way. For what is our hope, our joy, our crown, in which we will glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ when he comes? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and our joy." And so then he goes into the first part of chapter 3. Therefore, or my other version says so, therefore, when we could bear it no longer, we were willing to be left behind in Athens alone. And Paul wasn't alone, he had at least Silas with him. We sent Timothy, our brother and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ, to establish and exhort you in your faith, that no one be moved by these afflictions. Moved. Some versions say shaken, which I think probably it was more to the point than being moved by them. he was afraid they might be shaken by them. And, you know, all of us have probably been around somebody who's, the events of something in their life, something tragic happened, and it really shook them. Really shook them to their core. Well, that's what he's afraid of here. Not just that they were moved, but maybe they got shaken a little bit. All of us probably know some new Christians who, when things got rough, they bailed. And so Paul was afraid that these people might be doing that. For you yourself know that we were destined for this. It's an interesting phrase. For when we were with you, we kept telling you beforehand that we were going to suffer affliction, just as it has come to pass, and just as you know. For this reason, when I could bear it no longer, I sent Timothy to learn about your faith, for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and our labor would be in vain. So that's the whole context of chapter 3. We were worried about you. We sent Timothy. He brought back a good report. We're happy. All right. So that was short. Y'all go and do something else. One thing that comes up quite a bit in this short chapter is this idea of faith. He's going to refer to their faith 5 different times in 13 verses. That's what these put. He says, first of all, in verse 2, to strengthen and encourage you in your faith. Talked about that already. Verse 5, I sent to find out about your faith. I sent Timothy to find out about your faith, which is an interesting phrase, because I think at verse 5, he's tying their faith, their affliction. So is faith somehow tied to afflictions? I'm not sure about that. And then verse 6, he says, Timothy has brought us good news about your faith. Verse 7, we were encouraged about you because of your faith. And then verse 10, to supply what was lacking in your faith. And he's talking about these 5 different times. He doesn't just talk about faith, at least in this version, he's talking about your faith. That to me was just like, I need to stop and think about that a little bit, because he's talking to them about their individual faith. And so, next slide, we're going to talk about some of the things of faith. So I hope you're ready for me to stop talking, but you to start talking. All right, so what is faith? Faith in what? I mean, we can talk all night about that. Faith is very much part of Christian life. But in verse 5, we've got noted there, for this reason, when I could bear it no longer, I sent to learn about your faith, for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you. And so I wondered about this idea, is faith tied to problems? Is somehow a measure of our problems also a measure of our faith? Paul seems to be tying the two together. And then how is faith in general different from what he's talking about here, your faith? Is there a personal element to faith? My faith different from yours? So what do you think about that? Is there a personal element to faith? I think there is. But what does that mean? Is my faith generally different from any of yours?
And just as a term, your faith is what you trust in, what you hope. And so there would be a very distinct difference in the faith, these Christian faith, your average. They had faith in Christ. The converts, it's a difference. Your faith is in God. Their faith is in God. I think that's one.
In 1960, for 7 years, 62, 67, almost 70, we had 25 men at West Huntsville that went knocked on the doors and taught, baptized, over 100 years. But the key thing was we had a 13-lesson study after we baptized. We went in their house for 13 weeks and studied with them and grounded them in the faith. And so I would say 80% or 85% are still faithful today. Many of them are deacons and elders that stayed with the Lord because they got grounded in the faith.
Okay. So what is that faith? Is my faith different from your faith?
problem because in our lives, we face things that require us to trust, to believe, that are different in each one of our lives. And we have to face those, what might be easy for you to deal with, might be a real test of faith for me, vice versa. I think there is that personal element that simply says, in fact, it's a good question to say, how is my faith? Because obviously part of faith is knowing the Word of God and trusting it, but another one is to take a step and say, yeah, how to apply it, how do I deal with the situation?
It's an interesting question. If you really want to study in faith, you should sit down with Don and Sharon Walker, and not a Bible study. Just talk about all the stuff that Don and I were talking before you all came. About all the health struggles. How many times they've been told in their lives that they only had a few years to live. One time they told her, 7 years, and she's maybe 21 now, or past.
76 as of today.
It's just amazing. I mean, and to talk about your individual experiences having that effect on your faith, that would definitely have an effect on my faith. If over and over again I saw the work of God, and the doctors say I'm done, but somehow I'm not done, and that can really make it more resilient. So, what do we make of this idea of faith? Is faith different from your faith? Is the faith different from your faith? Yeah.
I think it depends because in our language and our culture, with like faith can mean people sometimes utilize faith as your religion or your spirituality. So in my mind, plenty of other ways to do it. There's faith as in how people might commonly say your religion or your practices faith. But then there's your own personal spiritual development, which I think we can take part in the same church culture and have similar practices with one another, but also the way that we develop our own personal. You can sit in a pew and not faith. And so the road is never the same.
A lot of you know that I worked with college students for several years at UT Knoxville. And one of the interesting things to watch among college students, especially, was that process of family faith becoming the first. I think that's what we're talking about. And I was talking to a bunch of high school parents at a church. They invited me to come speak to the high school parents about this transition their kids were going to be making going off to college. And I remember saying that if your kid hasn't had a crisis of faith yet, you might want to consider helping him have it. And my point was, while they're home, and you can talk these things out, and they have that base. They sit in a freshman biology class, and the teacher is an atheist, and they could find if their faith is not their own, it can crumble quickly because they just don't have that foundation. And for me, from my standpoint, seeing these kids come through my ministry there, Christian Student Center, coming from 100 different churches, you could tell the ones who had that foundation. You could tell. And we used to have fun with it. I'm sorry. This might not be the kind of thing to have fun with. I used to have fun with, be at church Sunday morning, there's mom and dad and a college-age kid. It's very evident they're visiting. So I go up and introduce myself. Hi, I'm Dave. Oh, well, we're the Smiths, but you know our Bobby. He's here every Sunday. Bobby is sweating bullets. He had to darken the door. Even once, I don't know but it's kind of like, oh, well, hey, Bobby, it's good to see you again. You try to help the kid out. But some of them didn't have enough faith to come to church the first time. And And another interesting thing that I don't want to talk too much about, because I wasn't in college. For them, God lived back home. So when they went back home, they went to church. When they went back home, they were very active. When they went back home, he preaches once a month, Sunday night, whatever. But and God didn't come to college with them. So, you know, this is it all relates to this idea of faith and what your faith is based on. If your faith in God is based on your family, then who are you when you're away from them?
Explain this for a second. 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. And Paul writes, says, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains. What is this all faith?
All faith. Well, and this is the one point I want to bring up. Faith is like a diamond, and you hold it, and you look at it from a different angle, and you see something different. Because not only do you have him talking about all faith, you also have him talking about how faith is a gift. And some people have the gift of faith. Was that a miraculous thing? Or, you know, I would think that all Christians have a certain amount of faith. Do some have super faith? So, I mean, it's a multifaceted thing. But I think what Paul is talking about to these people is their brand new Christian faith, right? They have been, hey, Robert. Robert, it's just he maybe lose my train of thought. They're brand new Christians, and he knows that their faith is kind of fragile. So he wants to help them get established in the faith and encourage them. Why I sent Timothy. Don't know how long Timothy stayed there, but hopefully he accomplished his mission. Did you have?
Well, I think just as we talk about each of us, the basic elements of faith are the same, but displayed different. It occurs to me as we look at Hebrews 11, it talks about all these people of faith. The different things that they faced were different. You know, but it required a simple trust, not so simple trust in the Lord to get it done. Of course, it gets my attention here, you know, as he wraps up, as he was talking about faith. Time would fail me to tell Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, lose your faith, conquer kingdoms, force justice, receive promises, stop the mouths of lions, quench raging fire, escape the edge of a sword, the strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, foreign armies to defeat. Well, we could go on. The point is that it's the same faith that works in us differently according to what it is that we are having to face and deal with life. Again, just that thought occurred to me in terms of differences in faith. Maybe this chapter illustrates it.
We again, when we were in high school, we ended up working with a lot of people from international work. Just it's a long story why it's the case, but I was talking to Bill Byer, and he just came back from Japan. We have friends in Japan that we made when we were in Knoxville. Thought we want to go see them sometime. But one of the friends we made were from the Middle East, and their life was quite a bit different. And one young man was a doctor. He was Muslim and he became a Christian. All right, get the process. He was Muslim, became a Christian. That didn't happen very often. It did in this family. The mother lived close to us. We gave her rights. We learned. But she told us about her son. And what happened was the Muslims that he had been going to him as a doctor stopped going to him because he became a Christian. So he lost all those people. The Christians, not to their credit, said, "Oh, he used to be a Muslim." They maintained prejudice because he used to be a Muslim. They wouldn't go see him. So he couldn't be a doctor anymore because in that part of the world, you're a Muslim or you're basically a Muslim or a Christian. Whatever flavor of Christian you may be, with the way they think of it. So he experienced firsthand kind of what I call persecution, affliction. And that was a tough thing. No.
define faith? Isn't there are other elements of spirituality that are easier to conceptualize? And faith is one that it feels like it's shape-shifty almost. Like, how would one define faith?
I'll avoid pulling out Hebrews 11:1. No, it's believing in what you hope for and believing in what you can't see. And that's a paraphrase. That's
I know.
To the world, it is. I mean, non-Christians look at Christians and say, you're the people who believe in things you haven't proved. And they fault us, right? Because we believe in things we can't see. We believe in a God. There's no proof for a God. Whatever. It is a nebulous thought, because you could list some things you have faith in, right? Have faith in God. Have faith in Jesus as his son. Have faith in the Word. Have faith in yada yada. But then, and I'm thinking that's what I'm trying to draw attention to here. Paul talks about their faith, not the faith. Their faith, because that's what's being tested. Go ahead. Do you have another question?
Well, the Greek word is translated as faith, belief, trust, which is beneficial but seems oversimplify what we might utilize for faith for in our common.
True. But I think what strikes a chord with me is when I think of faith, one element of faith is trust aspect, right? Do I trust God enough to live the way he says to live and not try to live the way the world does? Do I trust him that much? And I'm trying to think of this old saying means anything here, but we used to talk about how you have a strong faith in a weak bridge will get you wet, right? But a weak faith in a strong bridge keep you dry. And I think that's what I'm saying is that even if our faith is weak, if it's in the right thing, it can do great things. Now, I don't know what Jesus means when he says, if you have faith as so much as a little grain of sand or a little mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, I want you to hear. I don't know how that is. You know, and there's a part of me that says, oh, I know how it is. Because little by little, that mountain is being eroded, wind and rain. And after a while, that mountain is going to be over here. That's what it means. I don't know. But I think what he's saying, we just need to not miss the point, is a little faith can do a lot. And it's not a measure of my faith as much as what my faith is in and what it does. Because the Hebrews 11, those people didn't just have faith. They did something. And I think that's the next step. What does your faith motivate you to do or allow you to do that you might not otherwise be able to?
Romans 1:16, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. The gospel there is very close synonymous with faith. For it is that which brings you and puts the faith into.
Well, we could do a word study on faith and be here all night. And you would enjoy it, and I would probably have a good time, but the rest of them would probably leave after a while. But yeah, it is. It's a faith. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. You know, what are we listening to? What are we hearing? Well, in one aspect, faith comes by hearing, but also I think faith comes by experiencing. I think it's very natural for a person who's been a Christian a long time to have a strong and someone that hasn't been a Christian in a long time. And so when some 20-something tries to tell me how to live my life, you know, it's like, wait a second, you haven't lived enough of your life yet. You don't know what happened when both your parents died the same month, which mine did. You know, how do you do that? How do you handle stuff like that? Well, you either fall apart or you fall toward. That's your only option. You either fall to pieces or fall toward God. So where are we? How could someone help you with your faith? I like that's a good question. Paul sent Timothy to encourage them in their faith. Who could God send to you? That would help. And I know you're not thinking about it. So who else?
There's actually two ways. One way is you live by example.
Okay.
My grandfather's the reason I'm here. Or he was a man that everybody trusted. Nobody just trusted him. One, he was the man. He measured cotton. He said it, that was it. He was a Christian. He was a drunkard till he was 30 years old and then converted to Christ. And then the rest of his life, he lived to 75 years old. So his example puts a faith in me that I want to be just like him all my life.
So looking back, your grandfather had a very positive impact on your faith. I think all of us could probably look back and name people who took an interest in us and helped us through tough times, walked beside people. Someone who walks beside you while you're going through something rough, that is valuable.
What do you think about the thought that it's the opposite of panic?
Say what now?
It's faith is the opposite of panic. You know, you don't know what you're going to face, but when you face an obstacle, you either panic or you can remain calm because of your faith and the fact that, you know, no matter what it is, you know, I think about my dad had a poem he learned from his dad. It was, it fortifies my soul to know that though I perish, truth is so, that howsoever I stray or range, whatever I do, thou dost change. I steady your step when I recall that when I trip, thou dost not. You know, so it's like, as you go through your life, you face the death of your parents, the death of a child, something I can't imagine. You know, you face these things, and you either panic and flail and try to deal with it yourself and go crazy, or you have a calm that comes over you, knowing that, and I don't know how this is going to work out, and that builds on itself, because the more you have faith, the easier it is.
Well, you look back and say, well, it worked that time.
Yeah.
So it'll work again. Well, panic is one of those things, I think it's just easier for some people to panic. I don't panic. My wife panics. She doesn't know. But is fear the opposite? Is faith the opposite of panic? Faith the opposite of fear? Is faith the opposite of doubt? I think it's all. And that's my point. I think that faith has so many different aspects to it. It's a loaded word. Do you have faith? Well, say yeah. Have faith. To move mountains. Whatever. Other thoughts? This is good. Anything else? What else do I got up there? There are elements of your faith in which you need help. Probably all of us say something in that regard. A lot of elders don't help, or sometimes help faith. What is that faith that keeps you filling? Sometimes we need a little bit of that. Let's look what else I got up here. Is it true that faith is something you have or don't have? Okay, this is interesting. Verse 10. Paul says, I wanted to do this, and this, and I wanted to supply what was lacking in faith. All right. This is one of those phrases that kind of jumps out at me like, how does he know what's lacking in their faith? First, and it doesn't cause me problems, but it causes us some people problems to say, okay, you have to kind of think along with me. If you really believe that everyone is saved by faith and faith only, then how can there ever be anything lacking in your faith? that's the problem that the faith-only people kind of have with this verse, is that if they had enough faith to become a Christian, which they did, obviously, because they all did, he's writing, and isn't that enough faith? Is it?
We have a list of fruit of the Spirit. It's a whole list of attributes. And someone who is not trained one of those attributes, I would say that would be something like that attribute.
Okay, yeah, yeah, we could probably all, and look around Terry, the rest of us, we're in sad shape for some of us, right? Yeah, I think that's what most people say, what Paul is saying, is you're new Christians and you need some help to help grow in your faith, or grow in the fruits of the Spirit, as being one definition of those 9 things. But it just was interesting that he understands, I think, that new Christians would have some gaps in their faith. And that's what he's worried about, isn't it? That they'd have some persecution and might fall away. Yeah.
He had one incident, and I can't recall it right now, but where he went to preach, he was so worried about somebody else's faith, the door was open to him, but he couldn't preach. Paul.
He couldn't preach.
Couldn't preach because he was so concerned about those that he left behind, and until Timothy came and let him know that
If you can't find it, it may not be.
well, it is there.
Oh. I have faith in you.
That the door was open, but he couldn't preach because he was concerned about the country. It really weighed him down.
Yeah. Well, if you think about what he was doing, he was going around establishing churches, and then once he left, he didn't have any way of keeping track of what was going on. Or maybe there'd be a report, somebody traveling through could tell him that. That's why he went through, the first missionary journey, then the second missionary journey, and then there was a third missionary. Might have been some others. But Paul, he was worried about those people. I do remember him saying that he was weighed down by the conservative churches. And that's one of the things that really probably kept him up at night. This is worrying about the people that he had encountered along.
I just think there's something key here. You asked the question up there, how could somebody get strengthened and encouraged? How could somebody do that? And then I say the statement by Paul, if you walked into the room, like, see, after we get over the food and knowledge, I'd want to say, how in the world do you do this? How do you do this? How do you face what you have? How do you face death? How do you go without? How do you sit in prison? How do you do that? And I want to listen to it. And I want to say, that's the faith I want to have. Help me know that. Help me understand that. Whatever you say. And maybe nothing else than just as example. Kind of go, well, the Lord can strengthen him to do it. No, what is it that I need to do? Maybe there's even a thing here that says, what about everybody in this room? We don't share much about what faith is doing for us. Maybe we need to share that and say, I need strength from you. I need help from you. Maybe we're not telling enough of our stories. Again, you have to be careful when you brag it, but you do want to tell things that have challenged you, how you come to us. As even you were giving Don's illustration, he talked about the things that he's overcome. That's an encouragement, isn't it? So maybe we're sitting around with mouths two shut, and we're not thinking how we can help each other.
Not only, Don, I want to embarrass you, but Don's story is inspirational, and not just that they survived, so they have kept a faith that anybody in this group would love to have, and continue to trust God in the midst of. Well, Sharon's got to go back up. Going back to Mayo on Friday. So I'm sure she would like you to pray for her. They're going to put this net in to catch clots, right? Clot catching net, so that she can stop taking.
Here's the thing. You have to reconcile yourself. You get to the point when I had 2 doctors within 6 months to tell me they had less than a year to live. I looked at my wife and where she was weeping. I said, look, I said, the Lord wants to take me, he'll take me. I'm ready. But if he won't, he'll let me live. And I just left it at that. Went on about my business.
Well, that would cause me to stop and think, I'm still around. What am I supposed to be doing?
That's right.
What did
And I
God keep me
wondered
around
if
for?
I should have been doing the things I had to.
I think every one of us could probably say that. I mean, there's no real reason why any of us should still be alive, you know, with all the things that have happened in our life. Why is God keeping us here? Yeah.
I mean, but at the end of the day, that's a huge part of it, and I think as that's what young Christians want, older Christians. And what we usually end up getting is, man, this world is horrible. I don't know how anyone is going to be a Christian in a world like this. And it's, wow, thank you for that. I feel really encouraged to spread the gospel now.
She's talking about y'all.
I'm sorry. Hey, I'm talking about everyone. What we need is reasons to connect. What we need is willingness to connect.
Yeah.
And people who want to do that, and not just with, I mean, it's great to hang out with people our own age, and I need it for people my age, I need it for people your age, but we all need that. And that's why it's church, and we need to hear the stories of faith, because we can't do it by ourselves. God would have wanted us to do it by ourselves, but it's your love.
Instead of a Wednesday night class doing this, we just get to sit around and share our stories. I think we all have some fascinating Steve Blair. So, well,
How is he still?
how was Phyllis letting him live? Oh boy, faith is, okay, so he wants to supply what's lacking in there today. All right, this whole thing about persecution brought up some thoughts in my mind. Paul is concerned, what time are we? Okay, we got 6 or 7. Paul is concerned the persecution that the Thessalonian Christians might be experiencing after he fled, which has probably started with him, might have caused them to give up and turn back to their old lives. Now, when I think about that, I think about the parable of the sower in Matthew chapter 13. So let me turn there and tell you one of the types of soils that Jesus talked about. We're running out of time, so I'll just read this. He says, he's explaining the parable of the soils, right? So, as for what is sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. I think this is what Paul was concerned about among the Thessalonians. They heard the word, they received it with joy, everything was fine. But then look, what Jesus says is, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, and he endures for a while, and when tribulation and persecution arises on account of the word, immediately falls away. Right? So that's what Paul's worried about, is that guy. In that situation, he knows full well that can easily happen when things go wrong, especially in a young Christian's life. Now, this is a thought that I had. You know, do we tell new Christians, you know, the people you were studying with, do you tell them, oh, by the way, I might not have brought this up, but you're probably going to be persecuted. Is that okay? You know, do we tell them that up front for fear of scaring them away? I have this, you know, a lot of us went to pre-Hardeman. We understand the pre-Hardeman thing. But I have this picture of some student athletes who were recruited. Oh, come play ball, pre-Hardeman. And they get there, and somebody forgot to mention Bible class and chapel, you know? Wait a minute. Bait and switch. Well, have we done that with new Christians? Have we forgotten to tell them, oh, by the way, things may not go so smoothly? Do we tell them on the first visit? Which Jill Miller film strip did we cover that in?
Dating yourself.
I am dating myself.
I've never heard.
Okay, what of the Bible study method that you're currently using?
There's nothing like
There's- I can't come back to that.
Sorry.
But I don't think anybody explained that to me. young person, being a Christian, I think they really prepared me, for things that can go wrong, yeah.
We got hit one night, we stood with this young lady for a long time, baptized her in Christ. Took her home, when we got home, all of her furniture was set out on the side of the road. Her parents cat. They would not have it. It took years for her to speak, but she's still faithful. She just had an outstanding faith.
It's tough, it's tough. Some people, that decision, which may have been, it was very easy for me. It may be really tough for some, in the aftermath, maybe. And I've got, maybe my penance for having it easy is I try to help those people that didn't. Can't really share my experience. I can't say, well, I've been persecuted too because Don was mean to me once. But I just can't. Maybe I can find it. Maybe somebody ridiculed me because of but surely I never lost a job because of things. I got a lot of jobs because of I kind of had the opposite. I never lost a friendship, lost a relationship, lost anything. How do we do? Well, what kind of persecution do we face in America today? Well, a lot of times talk about that, and I can note that, I suspect my experience is common than the young lady who found her furniture on the stuff on her parents. My parents were excited. I didn't have that. Maybe you did. But what we're talking about with these people is that Paul was concerned that their new faith might be degraded. And I think I can look back on my life and see people that I've worked with become a Christian and just like, oh, where'd they go? What happened? They didn't stick around. And part of that's on them, but part's on me too, not following up. This is, I don't know, we can talk about this, we don't have time. Where Paul says that they were destined for persecution, or some versions say appointed for affliction. And there's that verse that says, for all those who will live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. And it always makes me wonder, do I need to go somewhere where they don't like me so I can be persecuted? What can I do to be persecuted so that I can fit the qualification? And I think we should rejoice in the fact that we don't have the environment here that we do in other countries. But don't rest on the laurels.
You got a good brother in Christ that spoke here once, Jyoti.
I remember Joe.
From India. And he barely escaped here a while back. He went out the back window to get away from the Hindus. They would have killed him if they caught him. And he knew it. So he goes with that all the time. But he continues to teach, and because he's converted so many, they'll kill him on sight.
And feel like they're serving God to do so. Sure. I think we're out of time. Anybody have any parting comments? Anything else? I'd like Glenn to clean up my mess next season.
Have faith, brother.
There's hail 58 on that. It comes from big old hail.
I will get that series of verses for you.
Okay.
That really hits hard. It says, go.
You know the right.
Right.
Yeah, there's a
pretty
good
size
right there.
That was Mark.
We didn't have anything big about dime or nickel.
I don't know if I had any at my house at all.
You can survive that. Yeah, those right there like that, that thing's not that big.
Man, the Union tornado, we were in Shepherd's Field, it was like literally basement.
That's massive.
It made divots in our yard. And it, of course, our roof was destroyed.
Oh, yeah. And windows probably too.
And it was loud.
Dad had windows broken up in his house last year.
Last night,
Hail.
We were in the closet with bicycle helmets on.
It's all dentless on the Aaron's truck. I just,
Oh, bring it on. Most of the YouTube, bring it on.
Okay, I'll try and think of something. Thank you.
Good deal. All right,
All right, you got it.
Glenn, is it you next week? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thanks for helping them out. They got those beds up, they're ready to go.
Oh, good. Well, I just thought of them when somebody said, got to, well,
Needs to be in the
Was thinking, fine. Call at cost. Haley. Where's he at? West Tennessee here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, I guess you got
Very good. Five,
this is me. Here's what it is. Not trying to sell. Street.
communication. Red. Just like,
Have you met her yet? What's this house?
she had, that's her. Victoria Marie. Yeah, but yet, when she texted me, she said, this is good.
Victoria. That Victoria.
Call her Victoria, even though Maria's
Victoria. You know, big Mark yelled back in the truck. Right. Looks nothing like. She's a stickler. She said, I do the same. I do. Those,
the what?
those are okay.
See, they do the stomping.
Oh, man.
Good. See, we got the pop, skin coat stomping.
Yeah, I had, they lose some life there. But, anyway, I stomped them, can't kill him there. And I had bears upstairs, but that's just not ever. He mad.
How about furniture moving and all that? You help with that?
I did most of it. They probably,
You kinda hung out there and moved stuff.
no, they'll move it around and that worked around. If painting, she hasn't done the painting. They moved everything else. They moved my stove around, put it back in place and all that. They put.
They're supposed to be there 1:00 Friday. Better get up here, my baby.
All right.
See y'all later.